from God's Unchanging Word Studios in New Orleans, we are pleased to bring you news, nuggets, and insights with today's host, Tom Carey.
Well, greetings, everyone, and welcome to God's Unchanging Word in another edition for our news, nuggets, and insights. And today is Friday, May 15th, 2020. We are almost halfway through the year already. We've got a very important program today. It's all going to center around tracking. You're going to hear a lot about tracking in the weeks, the months, and literally the years ahead. That this is going to be something that's going to affect everybody's life here in America, and for that matter, for around the world. So that's going to be the focus, and we're going to break it down today. We're going to start with COVID-19 trackers, HR. This is a bill that's been put through into Congress. Hasn't been approved yet, but it's been put through. HR 6666. Bizarre. I tell you, you can't get much more bizarre than that. All the sixes that's out there. So anyway, let's go on. COVID-19 trackers, where is this taking us? We're going to be our first program and talking about this on where it's taking us, and then we're going to get to our nuggets portion of the program. COVID targeting brown shirts. If you are any student of history, then you know the brown shirts brings us back to pre-World War II in Germany with Adolf Hitler. So could COVID tracking be the preliminary or the beginning of the brown shirts in America? We're going to talk about that at the end of the program. So please stick around. All right, got one short story because I got a lot to talk about today, so we're not going to spend a lot of time into our you can't make this stuff up, but we got a bunch of stuff piling up on us. We're going to be bringing it to you in the future. This is from Denmark. They're calling it a fake Bible. It's rewriting the Bible. The misrepresentation of the Holy Scripture by the Danish Bible Society has been met with a crescendo of international protest. And this is why. It's removing Israel from its land, or the connection between the Israelites and the land of Israel. It says, apart from other key issues of the faith, it denies the reader the knowledge of the intrinsic connection between the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament, and between Israel and its land. It falls into the trap in which the Apostle Paul warned, is it not you that support the root, but the root that supports you? This version, or its version of the Bible, robs the Christian faith of its Jewish roots. And I'd just like to substitute basically its Hebrew roots. But anyway, that was the write-up that came out. But it's a brand new Bible, and it fortunately has gotten protests from around the world. I honestly don't think it's going to make any difference. It's out there, and people who want to look at it and read it will, and we'll just see where it goes from here. It's just another way of Satan at the end time trying to eliminate Israel from the face of the... All right, let's get started. Each week we track down the viruses and how fast they're growing. We've been doing this all the way back into late February and March. So today we're going to start with April 7th. 1.3 million affected with 76,000 deaths. The following week, April 14th, you can see it grew by 50,000 deaths to 1.9, just under 2 million. On April 21st, 171,000 deaths with 2.5 million. So now we've seen it growing. Each week it's been growing now by like almost 500,000 new viruses or new contacts every single week, with about 40 to 50,000 people dying every single week. April 28th, a couple weeks ago, 3 million people, 211,000 deaths. Then last week, May 5th was 252,000 deaths with 3.6 million people affected. Then as of this morning, all right, we tape on Tuesday morning, so that's been our target date when we put it down. May 12th, Tuesday morning, 4.2 million people now affected with 286,000 deaths. So as less people have died, but you'll see it's maintaining around 500 to 600,000 new viruses, people affected every single week. I don't know how much this is going to go on, but the problem we have is because of the isolation, you finally turn everything loose, it just continues the cycle of going through. So little by little, I don't know how you're ever going to get rid of this. You know, they say eventually you will, and maybe it won't happen until they finally get a vaccine, which is a problem itself because they're trying to fool with these vaccines, put other things in it to be able to affect people's minds as well as their health, which is another issue. So now, I'm going to bring out a video here. This came out, believe it or not, this is from a TV series It was from an episode in 2003, and I believe it was in July of 2003, from The Dead Zone. I never watched the series, so I didn't know anything about it. But this is all the way back 2003. This is 2 years before we've seen the interesting information with Bill Gates when he was at the Pentagon talking about how they're going to be able to track people's minds and going after these radical Muslims at the time, which now they're going after the conservative Christian that falls into the same category thanks to the Pope and many others on the left. So now let's play this video. It's only about 3 minutes long, but take a look at how much they actually understood from a TV series of what was going on and the potential of what was going to happen down the road. Let's play that video.
All right, what's going on?
Just let me think about where to start.
Well, he saw something. What is it?
I saw a virus. I think some kind of disease.
A virus? Like what? Like SARS?
I don't know. All I know is that it's highly infectious and it may be fatal. Right now, we could all be infected. If we take this outside, we risk the whole town.
Johnny, how big is this gonna get?
I don't know. We just have to do everything we can to stop this, starting right now, Walt.
He's right. All right, here's what's gonna happen. We need to make sure that everybody that's inside stays inside. I'm gonna get a few deputies on it. We'll call it a lockdown.
Lockdown?
Well, until I come up with something better.
Walt, no. No, you cannot lock the school doors with...
This is for your family's safety.
Will I get sick too?
Yeah.
Maybe we should wear masks. What difference does it make? According to you, we've already been exposed. Let's get one thing straight, Mr. Smith. I'm responding to political pressure. You have no reason to be scared. Let me ask you something, Amy. Animals. You been around any animals in the backyard, even, let's say, a skunk, a raccoon? I'm gonna swab the inside of your mouth with this little Q-tip, trying to get a handle on this animal. Damn efficient airborne transmission. Blood tests and swabs aren't telling us much. We know it acts like a virus. It causes high fever and respiratory distress. Tracking and treating a mysterious outbreak like this would take the CDC months.
We better get started then. For anyone who hasn't been exposed already needs to wear a mask.
China. Isn't that where flu viruses come from?
Yeah, a lot of viruses come from there.
International flight to China?
That's no coincidence. Whatever it is, it originated in China.
Time is not on our side.
It's like looking for a needle in a needle stack.
We have ruled out all the usual suspects: influenza, SARS, bacterial pneumonia.
How long is that going to take?
Well, it took 34 days to isolate the coronavirus that caused SARS, and that's fast.
I'm authorizing a quarantine on everyone who's come in contact with a symptomatic person.
There's got to be something I can do.
On the enzyme, this virus leads when they were
So the chloroquine did
malaria.
So the chloroquine.
The chloroquine.
This is it. This is your virus.
I'm sorry, but there's no cure for that. Chloroquine, that's an anti-malarial drug.
No. Listen, it suppresses the enzymes. What happened?
We started everyone on chloroquine, stopped the thing dead in its tracks. Now, the CDC would have figured it out eventually, but not in time.
Well, you're sitting there doing this. That was 2003 from a TV series. Does it sound familiar? I tell you, when you see a video like this is when conspiracy theories become reality. Amazing what was going on. That was 2003. And that was just little snippets of an hour program to give you an idea of what was going on. Who knows, you might be able to find that program on the web if they don't take it off because it's so close to real. It is absolutely unbelievable. So I wanted to show that to you. So we don't know what's really going on to the depth of everything. And there's no way to know today because it has become a political football of what's right and what's wrong of the nation and how it's actually destroying the planet as we speak. Not from the virus itself, but how we react to it. So now, let's take that information. Let's begin to start looking at the trackers. Where will it lead? All right, that's the bottom line. This is what I want to talk about today. This is a headline, and I went to the internet, and believe it or not, there's a whole pile of headlines that read just like this. He says, we need an army. Hiring of coronavirus trackers to be seen as a key curbing disease spread. So what are we looking at to have an army in the United States of people who are going to begin to control and tell you where you can go, how close you can go, where you can stay open, whether there's going to be schools, whether there's going to be jobs, whether your business is needed or not as we go through this. But they're going to hire an army of people to do it. Now, this again, if this was a year ago, that they're going to have a whole army of thousands and thousands of people in the United States who are going to be monitoring everybody to make sure you're doing what you're doing, that they're going to have drones flying all over the air to make sure they can spot you to keep you distancing, that would have been a conspiracy theory. Well, it's no longer a conspiracy theory. It has now become reality. I'm going to show you that today, what's going on. When I began to look, I'm noticing all around the world, they're doing the same thing. This is from Belgium. They're hiring 2,000 trackers. There's a squad of investigators would first target people who don't download a contact tracer. All right, so here's people now over in Belgium that if you're not willing to take the tracer, now what is a tracer? That could be an implant, it could be a chip, it could be a dye. Bill Gates is creating some kind of a dye where they can put like a tattoo dye on you. But if you're not willing to have that tracer, you know, that where you might have caught COVID-19, they're going to isolate you or put you away. That's in Belgium. Couldn't happen in America? Well, I'm afraid it is happening in America also. California's to hire thousands, literally thousands of contact tracers as part of a reopening plan. Governor Newsom said on Monday that he wants to increase a few thousand tracers currently employed by the state to 20,000 people. 20,000 people in one state to track people who might have been in touch with somebody, who might have been in touch with somebody, who's touched somebody who has COVID-19. That's what this is all about. They'll begin with the circle. Here's the person who's got it. Okay, who did you see today? Then the next line of defense, who did they see? Then you get the next line. And they're going to have 20,000 people in California to do this. The governor says that more than 3,000 employees per week will be trained to trace the spread of the coronavirus. How do you trace it? It's people. They're not tracing the spread alone. They have to trace the people who have the spread. Contact tracing is a method used to quickly isolate those who could be carrying COVID-19. That means that you might be sleeping in your bed one night, and they'll have these COVID tracers out there. You'll be all of a sudden here they'll come drag you out your bed and go put you some isolation place until this is all done to make sure that you don't contact someone else. Couldn't happen in America? Well, get ready. It's happening right now. Governor Newsom said, some people are a little suspicious. I understand that the mistrust of the government, but that's too bad. Hey, like that. That's too bad. Just get used to it. This is the way it's going. It's going to be that way. We're going to tell you what you can do. All right, now let's take a look at this. All right, now he's just one. I mean, I wanted to pull a clip, and you've probably seen all the clips, especially the person who was in Chicago, the mayor, talking about. It was angry that they're going to tell you what to do, and they're going to put you in jail if you don't listen to them. All right, so now you probably heard all those news. What I try to do in News Nuggets and Insights is take it outside of just the news to say, where does this fit into the realm of the spiritual plan of what's going on between the two enemies of Satan and his demons and God's people? All right, so that's what we try to get to today. So where's all this taking us? All right, so you know the obvious. You get that on the news every day. So let's see how this begins to move and come into play in America. It says the U.S. needs an army of contact tracers if there's any hope of getting back to normal. I mean, our only hope is we're going to have an army to police it. That's their solution. I mean, I'm looking at a crew to try to make sure we're all on the same page here. All right? Contact tracing is detective work conducted by public health workers to determine where and when people might have been exposed to a disease. Now you're going to go on an interrogation and see if you've been near somebody or what's been your contact, all right? The U.S., there are roughly 2,200 contact tracers stationed nationwide. They typically respond to outbreaks of foodborne pathogens and trace back to sexual partners of people diagnosed with STDs. Right now, they're tracing the contacts of just a fraction of the people who have been diagnosed with COVID-19, the illness caused by the coronavirus, and says the officials across the country are sounding the alarm that hundreds of thousands of contact tracers will be needed to get the country back to work. Did you just hear what I read? Hundreds of thousands. We're talking about an army in America who's going to be able to have the power to go after you and be able to tell you how you're going to live. And don't tell me for a moment that you won't see this abuse take place. That will be used when you give a little person with a lot of power that goes to the head, that you will not see abuse beginning to take place in this nation. Nonprofits launches a COVID-19 treatment and vaccine tracker with daily updates. And that's what we saw in the little news piece I brought with Belgium. In other words, not only are they going to have these hundreds of thousands of people, they're eventually going to force people to when they got a vaccine, either you're going to take the vaccine for the welfare of everybody around you, or you're not going to be participating in this society. You won't go to school. You won't have a job. You won't be able to get on buses or airplanes because they want to be able to track this with daily updates. That means whatever you're doing, they're going to be able to track through the internet of what's taking place. They're even talking about putting an app on your phone that you'll have to maintain with you so they'll know exactly where you are every minute of the day in case they need to track you, in case someone you know has come in contact with someone who might have been in touch with someone who might have COVID-19. Can you begin to see how bad this is looking right now? Can't happen here in America? Well, stick with me a little bit longer here. COVID-19 treatment and vaccine tracker currently offers a list of nearly 60 treatments as well as 43 vaccines in development. Everybody around the world is working on something, trying to get this corrected and trying to get it done. So they will need a massive team to do the actual tracking. So it all comes back to it. No matter how good it is, we still got to be able to watch and to monitor. So now, let's get serious, all right? If that's not enough, you have to ask yourself, 100,000 people across the country, 100,000, who's paying for that? Well, believe it or not, you're going to be paying for it out of your taxes to have people monitor to tell you how you can live. I mean, this sounds like, and I mentioned last week, this is going back to pre-World War II Germany and Europe. I don't have any other example to show you except for that. They're smaller countries, and I can go into them, but that's the history of what I've studied for a lot of years in my life. So we're looking at that beginning to take place here. Let's take a quick look at how this is going to be paid for now. Now we bring us to that bill with that strange number, H.R. 6666. The 116th Congress, it's the 2019-2020 Congress, submitted on May 1st, 2020 by Representative Bobby Rush, Democrat out of Illinois. I put all of this up here for one reason, to let you know that this is not a conspiracy. It's not made up. This is a fact. It's in record. It's been submitted. It hasn't been approved yet. It will be approved, but to this degree, I don't know. It will be approved. It will be modified, but they have to have a way to be able to pay for the trackers. Well, it can't be the states paying for it because they're already broke. Why? Because they shut down. So here's the thing, it's the states who are shut down. Talk about this merry-go-round. The states say we have to shut down to keep us safe, so the government, you have to give us the tax money because we don't have any money because we have our businesses shut down. So the federal government is saying, well, I can't bring you any tax money because you got it all shut down, so there's no tax money coming to us so I can give to you. You see the merry-go-round? That's the wisdom of our leadership. But anyway, that's what's going on. That's just the beginning. I mean, I could spend hours on this kind of stuff. It's absolute nonsense, drive you absolutely crazy. So now, it's Section 1, the short title of this bill. So this act is cited as COVID-19 testing and reaching and contacting everyone, or it's going to be called the TRACE Act. We're going to trace everybody to tell you where they're going for, all right? So now that's the foundation. There's the name. That's the bill and when it was introduced. So now we go back to the question. Are you going to pay for this? Now get ready. If you're at home and you ain't sitting down, sit down, because I'm going to show you something that's going to absolutely blow you away on how they're going to pay for this. All right, here we go. Paying for it. Authorization of appropriation section. You see all that one and all them zeros behind it? We're talking about appropriating $100 billion. I had to go back and keep looking at this and said, that can't be right, $100 billion, really? But that's what that is. That's $100 billion for 1 year. Try to imagine that. I'm going to put this in perspective. $100 billion to run this department. Such sums as may be necessary for each fiscal year, including 2021. We don't have it fixed in 2021. Well, we're going to do another $100 billion. And another $100 billion. I don't see any way they're slowing this thing down yet. Every time they think they got to slow down, they open up more people are brought into it, they get more affected. So it's like this vicious cycle that just continues to circulate around the globe. So any subsequent years during which the emergency period continues. Now, one more thing that you see here that's not being said. If it goes away, if they get a vaccine, and a new virus comes in, they've already got the appropriation bill there. They will go into effect next time. And we know as God's people, from what God talks about in the warnings of Revelation, there are going to be a lot more of these. We're talking about taking sometimes a fifth of the population, a third of the population. We're talking about massive death that's unimaginable in human terms. So when you look at the deaths today and all those numbers that I brought you before, and you look at what Revelation talks about, now you got all of this in place. It's going to begin to control people and how they function. It's under the scheme of money is no object. But that's where we're at now. So now, let's put this into perspective. Department of Homeland Security. Now, I think we all know Department of Homeland Security. It's pretty big. They're the ones watching everything that's coming into America, is going out. We're watching all the terrorist groups. You see them everywhere. Department of Homeland Security. In their department, their budget is $49.8 billion. This appropriation bill doubles Homeland Security. All of Homeland Security. To give you an idea what's going on, how about this? The DOD, the Department of Defense. Here's the Department of Defense. This carries all the military, including the new Space Force, the Army, the Navy, the Marines, Air Force, all five, including the Space Force. $738 billion for that. So literally, this one appropriation, they're asking for 1/7 of the entire Department of Defense's budget. This thing is massive. There's no way to imagine what's going to be accomplished here. That means they're going to have buildings, they're going to have computers, they're going to have satellites, they're going to have, you name it, that's going to be out there. And what's for? Tracking. Why? Because you need it for your health. Think about this, where this is going to. This includes the major increases in the OCO, the Overseas Contingency Operations. All right, so now, in the middle of all this, I just threw you in a left turn. This bill here, the 738, includes the OCO. Why are they increasing the money to the OCO with pressures growing around the world? I will bring you back to Luke 7:25. Luke 21, verse 25, I believe it is, in the sermon, The Roaring Seas, where you're going to have this continual pressures building and building and building, till eventually there's no way to solve the problem. So while all this is going on with the COVID, there's a new war continuing to, Cold War between the United States and China, And China and India now are beginning to struggle. And both of these have nuclear warheads over there. And it wouldn't take but one nuclear warhead in that region with the wind blowing right that the seal of one of the seals and a third of mankind is destroyed. It would only take one nuclear warhead in the right place between India and China where you have these massive populations and you have just begun the seals. That escalation is beginning. There's a battle between the waters and the lands between the Philippines and Japan and China. So we're moving ships in there to keep peace over there. So there's an escalation growing around the world. Now, you're not being told that, but they know it. Why? Because they have just increased the money to the OCO. Remember, I've told you years and years, is track the money. It'll tell you what's going on. So there we have all this is going on. But anyway, this gives you a perspective of how much $100 billion and what this department does. So now, did we see this in history and where's this going? Will these trackers become the brown shirts like in Germany? They were known as the SA in Germany. They were called the stormtroopers. They're controlled by intimidation, violent assault, and aggression. Now, last week I played a little video. It's less than 2 minutes long. It was on the Tucker program. And when I told you that, I said, it sent chills down me when I heard this person speak at the end of this little video that it reminded me so much of Germany. I'm going to play it again and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Let's play that second video now.
Totalitarianism does not shock us anymore. Maybe that's because all of a sudden it's all around us. You may have seen this tape already. If not, you've likely seen many more like it in the past few weeks. 2 armed officers arrive at a family's home in Wisconsin. Someone has reported the mother to police for arranging a play date for her daughter. That's now a crime. Here's what happened next.
Are you aware that we're in a stay-at-home order right now?
Yeah, obviously.
By the government?
Yes, I am aware.
Okay, you're aware of that?
I am aware.
So I don't need to explain that to you?
Why are you here?
Because your daughter is going to play at other people's home and you're allowing it to happen. Stop having your kid go by other people's home.
Are we done here?
No, we're not.
Okay.
Your middle initial and your last name.
I'm not giving it to you. I haven't done anything wrong.
Okay.
Perfect.
Got it. We got it.
Yeah,
okay.
And that'll be documented too, that you're uncooperative.
You were uncooperative. That will be documented. Notice the tone they strike with this mother. They are standing on her property, uninvited, hectoring her about the so-called crime of allowing her daughter to play outside the house. They're not apologizing for this. They're not embarrassed to be carrying out an order that has no basis in science. They are utterly self-confident. They treat her with pure contempt like a peasant. And later, the Calumet County Sheriff's Department posted an account of what happened on their Facebook page. In it, they refer to that mother's mobile home 6 times. Just, she lives in a mobile home. Oh, just a prole, just a peasant. Shut up and obey. Who cares what she thinks? They believe they have the right to do that. The question is, where exactly do they get that right? That's a good question. It's a question that we are strongly discouraged from asking. The short answer is governors told them they could. Never in American history have politicians been more powerful than they are now. Effectively, they are gods.
Now, try to imagine 100,000 people around the country that have the ability and the power to do what they're doing, but take it to the next step. Because you are uncooperative, they will note it down that you are now a risk to society and will drag you out of your home and put you in jail. You don't think it can happen? It absolutely can happen. It's been happening in Canada, and it's been happening around small spots around the United States. For people who don't listen, they shut their businesses down. For people who want to try to stay open, they'll take away their licenses and they'll never open again. This is just the beginning of what eventually is going to take place. We all need to be aware of all this, what's going on. So now, let's go on, let's continue. Where is all this leading to? America's brown shirts in pre-war Germany, they controlled everything by intimidation. So let me stop for just a second. Did that sound a little intimidating? Somebody standing outside your home that way? Suppose they came in with a van and have armed people with them, and they're going to come and say either you cooperate or we're taking you to jail. Because that will come next. Don't believe it won't. It will, because it is happening right now. They were known as the SA or the Stormtroopers, which is the abbreviation for my wife speaks, Audrey speaks a little bit of German, so I asked her to give me how to pronounce that, but I'm not even going to try it. They were the assault division, the SA, or the stormtroopers. So now, I'm going to show you something now, what God's been blessing us for the last 7 years of putting these different series together. So what God has given to us in the spiritual realm, knowing what's coming, as he said before, he's not going to do anything till he lets us know beforehand. So let me show you now what God's been showing us through these different series. I'm going to pull in a couple of different ones, a couple we haven't talked about recently, that now apply to what's beginning to take place. This is what we covered in Lessons from Lincoln in telling us about the insight of what's going on. We know that God has a structure and a plan. This is the overall plan. It's like looking at a building. It's the finished product. That's the structure that God has built, so to speak, and Jesus Christ being the chief cornerstone, all right? So that's what we're looking at for the structure. It's God's plan for salvation. Then you take away the facade, you take away the outside, you look at the building blocks of it. That becomes your framework, which are the events that will happen at any given point of time in the structure. So now if you saw that in Lincoln, so you know what I'm talking about. But for people who got news nuggets and insights who may not have the sermon yet, I'm giving you a little bit of background. And what I want to do today is show you how the information God's blessed us with over the last 7 years is now becoming relevant. Because now it applies to where we are, and we have been able to bring it to you years in advance in many of these cases. So now, 3 is the preparation. So in God's plan through Lessons of Lincoln that we learned from Abraham Lincoln, there's 3 primary things that we understand. The preparation was the knowledge needed to function within the structure and the framework at any given point of time. Now, Amos 3 says, surely God will do nothing unless he reveals his secret to his servants, the prophets, first. In other words, everything we're going through today and what we're looking at is taking us somewhere, right? So that means, according to God's word, unless the Bible is not true, he's already told us how this is going to take place. So that means he's had something in the Old Testament that we can look at. What I find more and more interesting today is that what we thought happened there is the former and the latter. God's also in the latter days giving us a physical and a spiritual, so that we can go back in our time to be able to look at what was taking place over the last 100 years or 200 years and see how it applies today. And we can use that knowledge by going to the Old Testament and know what he did from before. I hope that made sense. I didn't go too fast with that. I got a bad habit of going too quick and trying to bring too much information in. Sometimes people write in and say, can you explain that a little more, because I didn't take enough time. So now let's show you how this applies today. This was in Lessons from Lincoln. I'm going to begin with this first, and then I'll show you how it applies today. All right, so here is the structure. This was number 1 of the Lessons from Lincoln, is the structure. And in the structure, God had a plan for mankind that took place for 7,000 years, right? That's part 1. So at any given point of time, when we get to part 2, that we could take anywhere along that 7,000-year period, and we're up to just about 6,000 years now, is that we can look at that and just kind of blow it up. It's like if you was on a timeline and you was on the internet, you would just open up like this day in history, all right? So that if we did that now, and we moved our timeline in the 7,000-year plan, and in Lessons from Lincoln, I stopped it at 1917 on a purpose to show you what was taking place. So in 1917, what took place that affected mankind that was in association with God's plan for humanity that we can look at Old Testament, New Testament. In 1917, we see the framework being built around what was taught in the Old Testament. And in that series of the Day of the Lord, by the way, in every one of my series now, I theme them. So you can go back and look. So that if I'm using it, you'll see on the left or upon the top right, that's the series this is coming out of. So if you wanted to go back and look for something that I'm referencing here, just go on the internet, go to the website, look on the Day of the Lord series, and there it is. So in the Day of the Lord, we have 2 things. Believe it or not, the physical of God establishing his modern day Israel at the end time, which was prophesied to take place, right? But this was in Jerusalem or Judah, and you have the spiritual. Right? The spiritual side, we know that event in 1917, on December 8th and December 9th, 1917, was prophesied. That physical event was prophesied spiritually by the prophet Haggai in the Old Testament, and it fulfilled the very day it took place, December 8th and 9th, according to the Old Testament. This was building the physical nation of Israel. This was the prophesied, the physical. So now there's a spiritual nation that has to be established. The spiritual nation is God's people moving into the kingdom with Jesus Christ at his return. So now everything here gives us a type and an analogy of what we're looking for at the end time. All right, you with me? All right, so now let's go again. So now let's move our timeline. You follow my timeline moving along here. Now it comes to 1922 to 1945. We moved ahead of just a few years to see what took place before the establishment of Israel. Now remember, I left up here, you looked at the physical and the spiritual. So what took place here? We showed everyone the spiritual of what was taking place in building in lessons from Lincoln. So we went through step by step of God bringing us to the return of Jesus Christ. But now, what do we look at that gives us the physical? What do we look at to give us the physical? Believe it or not, I'm not getting away from trackers. I'm showing you how everything we've been teaching over the years now is coming into play day by day, week by week. Now, one more thing I want to mention here before we go into our break is that you notice that we're not prophesying anything. All we're taking is the prophecies that God had and using what God said to bring us to our time. So we apply what God has said, we align it with history to get the conclusions of where we are today. It also tells us where you're going, because he said, and we just read it in Amos, he's not going to do anything till he tells us first. So now, when we come back, we're going to use that same information and we're going to go a little bit deeper to tell us about tracking and some of the problems we're going through when we come back. So now, let's take a break. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about COVID targeting, the new brown shirts. Let's take a look at this little video, great little video called Forward Thinking, and I'll be right back in just a couple minutes. Welcome back. All right, let's get right into the second portion of our program today. This is going to be COVID targeting, the new brown shirts. All right, so now let's pick up where we were before we went to the little break with that video. We want to find out now, what's the missing box? So what has God showed us? In other words, what can I go back to that aligns Old Testament with New Testament and all these things that we've been looking at and putting it into place to understand COVID trackers and where that might lead us for. Now, to do so, I'm going to go back to a series that we had just about a year or so ago. This is called Deception and Lying Wonders. Remember I told you that you can go to any series that I'm doing now. I theme them out so that you can follow along and go back to where I'm pulling the information from. And you will find everything we're telling you today was already been told to you when we went through the series. In fact, this is the very slides. Sometimes I modify the slide to take a few things out that's not needed for now, but this was, I'm leaving alone. January 30th, 1933, they appointed the Chancellor of Germany, Hitler. All right, we all know about what was going on there. But what began in 1922 was what he had was a civilian army. They called themselves the Brown Shirts, and they were the intimidating group that protected Hitler, protected his ideology, and anyone who didn't agree with them, they would basically just disappear, is what was going on. In 1933, they were given to him what was called the Enabling Act that allowed him almost total dictatorship. Does that sound familiar? In the video you just saw with Tucker, they were asking him, who gives them that power to do what they were doing? Well, the governor and the mayor. They were given unfettered total power and control. They could decide what they wanted to do, how long they want to stay open, when they want to close, what businesses they want to stay open. And you don't have a say-so in it. And many people finally began to revolt a little bit about that. But do you see the parallel? The Enabling Act allowed him to do almost anything he wanted to do at that time. It was temporary, just like this is temporary also. They immediately began to attack and with the destruction of the Jews. As soon as he had total power, he went after the Jews. Now that ought to concern us now because see the end time parallel, God's elect are going to be going after. The Bible says they're going to drag him before the magistrates. They're going to take him before the law. They're going to put him in prison. Some people are going to lose their lives. It even to the point where it says Satan is eventually going to overcome the elect. God's word says it's going to be time of the wearing out of the saints. But through it all, God says they will prevail. God will strengthen them. They will be encouraged. But isn't it better to tell you the truth now to let you know what's going on instead of giving you a feel-good sermon? All these religions today who want to make you feel good, they have a purpose, but they're not giving you the plan and the warning for what's coming. So now, let's go on. He had his reign of terror that lasted for about 12 years, and we showed you some of that parallel. I don't know if I got that slide in here or not. I try to not to use everything here for the sake of time. The Olivet prophecy, Matthew 24, says this. Now, as he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us, when will these things be, and what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age?" All right? The first thing, Jesus said to them, "Take heed that no one deceive you, for many will come in my name, saying that I am the Christ, and will deceive many." Well, you have today the Pope who sits on the throne of saying that he is God on this earth. He sits in the seat of Jesus. He's the authority on this earth, so that's the beginning. But that's just the beginning. You know, everybody, there's a lot of people out there going to be doing this, right? So now, this was brought out, and I didn't bring the video this time for the sake of time. This was put out by Farrakhan, Louis Farrakhan. He says he represented the Messiah. He said, "I represent Jesus, and I am that Jesus." He said it. We got it in a video. It's online. You can see it. He says, "I will finish the destruction of the Jew that began 2,000 years ago." I'm not making that up. That's on tape. I am that Jesus, and I'm going to go destroy the Jews that began 2,000 years ago. All right, let's go on. Same thing. Hitler states that he will have a 1,000-year reign. So in the physical of the destroying of Europe and conquering the world, he believed he was a type of the Messiah. And he was ushering in a 1,000-year reign that Jesus Christ will do when he comes back during the millennium. Adolf Hitler to the British and a correspondent in Berlin in 1934 said this, "At the risk of appearing to talk nonsense, I tell you that National Socialist movement will go on for 1,000 years. Don't forget how people laughed at me 15 years ago when I declared that one day I will govern Germany. They laugh now, but just as foolishly. I will declare that I will remain in power." In his temporary authority to have total control, during that period of time, he brought in his brown shirt and he began to wipe out all opposition, killing them, building prisons, putting them in prison, and intimidating anyone who would raise his voice against him. And he used a man to do that, and I'll show you him in just a minute. It was the National Socialist movement is what he was building there. This is a quote from Adolf Hitler. He said, "I intend to set a 1,000-year reign, and anyone who supports me in this battle is a fellow fighter for a unique spiritual, I would say divine, creation. Rudolf Hess, my assistant for many years standing, would tell you, if we have such a leader, God is with us. He spoke about himself in the third person. And he says, I have Rudolf Hess will verify what I'm telling you to be true. Amazing. Now, let's take a look at this. Watch the parallel of what's lining up here that we have today. When he began in 1933, he began his reign of terror. He ended in 1945, lasted for 12 years. 3 years later, we have the establishment of Israel. We have here. Now, it was a total of 15 years that takes place. Here I got the slide that I used earlier talking about his 15-year reign. All right, so now let's pull that aside and let's take that physical now and show you how it applies to a spiritual. In 1948, that 15 years began the prophecy being fulfilled in Isaiah 66, that shall the earth made to bring forth in one day, or shall a nation be born at once? And it was the physical nation, what we understand today as modern-day Israel, which is primarily the Jews, the Benjaminites, and some of the Levites, but it is known today as the Israelites. That's only half of the prophecy. That's the physical portion of the prophecy, not the spiritual. At the very same time that Hitler rose to power, God began raising up a work in 1933 with the Radio Church of God. So here we have lining up the work of God and the rise of evil, all at the same time, same year. Isn't it interesting now that here we have beginning of 2017, 18, till now, we have the Pope rising up and the work of God more important and needed than ever before for the spiritual. So we have a duality lining up at the end time. Why? Because the other half of this prophecy has not been fulfilled. It will be fulfilled when Jesus Christ returns. 2018, scientists claim we have 12 years. How's that? Sound familiar like with Hitler? 12 years. And the program began to bring this about in 2015, here in America, by the way, at the UN in 2015, which gives us the 15-year period. So here we have again the lining up at the end time of the physical and the spiritual. And just as you had a spiritual work beginning with the work of God back in 1933, I tell you today there's a spiritual work going on with the Church of God in the community of the scattered brethren around the world doing the very same thing of warning this world. And that's why we ask everyone every single week to please help us spread this word, because Satan's doing everything in his power to stop it. That's what's going on right now. Then when Jesus Christ does come, at the latter portion, we will see the end of the prophecy being fulfilled. For as soon as Zion travailed, she brought forth her children, plural. That is the future body of the begotten children of God today, born into the kingdom when Jesus Christ returns. The exact same timeline, the exact same period of time, a physical work, a spiritual work, and the alignment of the physical is beginning to take place just as it did with the brown shirts in Germany, is happening today with the alignment of the COVID trackers, which will change. Conspiracy? If you believe it's a conspiracy, you will do so at your own peril, because they're already lining up to get the money to get it done. So now, let's move on. The Enabling Act. Look what happened, how fast it moved. The Hitler called on the Reichstag members of the Vote Enabling Act on March 23, 1933, pointed to plenary powers of temporarily the passage of the act. That was all just temporary. But everybody who can revoke it were killed or taken out, because they never had a chance to revoke them. The law gave them freedom without any parliamentary consent or even without constitutional limitations. You see the same thing taking place with the COVID trackers. You see with the mayors and the governors. You're seeing the forerun of what's going to come in just a very short span of time. Hitler addressed the Reichstag on March 20, 1933, seeking the assent to the Enabling Act. He offered the possibility, he said, of friendly cooperation. Remember when I said in that video last week, and I showed you again today, it says, we're going to report that you're not cooperating. Look where my chills went to when I seen that. Because, I've studied the history of the nation of Germany and what they use and how the mind control over the people, the fear, the intimidation. And it was so important to me in my earlier years in study that I never forgot it. Well, now I understand because, see, it's all coming into play. And I'm sure you all have done the same thing. You know, believe it or not, Hollywood was great with understanding this. And they've got many movies showing us how it all takes place. And you ought to find some of those movies. And I keep saying we ought to make a list. You know, I'm looking at my crew here. We ought to make a list of all those movies that show you how the personality changes in a nation. So the first thing he does after he gets his enabling act, he goes after to destroy the Jews. Now that ought to be alarming to all of us because you see what's going to happen is the Pope's already laid it out, is that those conservative Christians, you know, they're the problem. Everybody's got one. They all got a group of them. You let them get together, they create a church. We've got to get rid of those people. Why? Because they're not cooperating. So he went after the Jews to kill them. The very first things that he did, he shut down their businesses. Happening today. You don't cooperate, you don't have a business. So now, let's go on. Will this be America's brown shirts? Wow, I don't know how you can miss the connection. This is Ernest Röhm, the picture you're looking at on the screen up there, Ernest Röhm. Ernest Röhm was the leader of the brown shirts. And in the brown shirts, it grew. Let me show you how fast it grew. Hitler meant for them to serve in Nazi Germany. The group was largely anti-Semitic and anti-democratic. 1930, the Nazi Party came to power. This is before Hitler, 3 years before Hitler took control. When he came to power, the SA they put 70,000 people. We're talking about 100,000. We went 100,000 people across America. In just a few short years, by 1933 and just a little bit after, it went to 4 million. When they realized in America that 100,000 isn't going to do the job, what are they going to do? They're going to get more money, they're going to get more people. 4 million people. He became one of the most powerful, influential people in Germany. And because he was, Hitler had him killed. He couldn't have anybody to challenge his authority. But he's the guy who did it, Ernest Röhm, killed by Hitler. It grew to the point where it was called the Night of the Long Knives. Anyone disagreed? They were uncooperative. It began to fall right here. Will America have a Night of Long Knives? When Hitler rose to power in 1933, the SA became the official government organization. They joined regularly with police in order to arrest, to torture ideological, political, and even personal enemies, including many Jews with a vengeance, and they set up concentration camps for the very purpose. Now, you might think that the concentration camps were for the Jews. Not originally. The very first ones were built up for people who were uncooperative with that party. Sounds frightening, but it's true. That's what took place. So now, Night of the Long Knives. They're involved in a violent purge of certain members of the Nazi Party from June 30th to July 2nd over 3 nights. Prior to that, the Long Knives, Hitler had gained the most massive amount of power thanks to his enabling act. And that act, for all intents and purposes, nullified any checks and balances on Hitler. Just as these COVID trackers, if not carefully monitored, will eliminate any checks and balances. Money's no object. It's for the welfare of the people, and if you're not cooperative, we're going to put you away. That's what it's telling us here. And that means you won't be able to go to church. Or you may not be able to go to church on Saturday. You may only be able to go on a Sunday. You may not be able to buy or to sell. Sound familiar? Well, that's where it's going. He was able to pass laws without any input from Parliament or judiciary review, and Hitler's action was almost non-existent. In similar fashion, we are seeing governors and mayors passing laws that are unrestricted and are not responsible to anyone, including shutting down businesses and having people arrested and put in jail. Amazing. And you have seen some of those stories on the news, so I don't need to go back into those. The Bible warned us that this time is coming. You know, for the longest, I couldn't imagine in America how it was going to happen. I really couldn't. I had a real hard time with that. But in Luke 12:12, God says this, "And when they bring you into the synagogues and unto the magistrates and powers, take no thought of what you will think or how you shall answer or what you shall say." Whereas God's going to tell us what to say. "For the Holy Spirit shall teach you in the very same hour what you ought to say." So what God's saying, if you're one that's brought before the magistrates, don't worry. He says, God is going to tell you what you shall say. And you will be led by the Holy Spirit to do what you need to do. And in Matthew 24, as I begin to wrap this up, Then they shall deliver you up to be afflicted, and they shall kill you, and you shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. And then shall many be offended. They shall betray one another and shall hate one another. So, wow. You know, when you read that, do you know that around the country there are governments, municipalities, they're offering rewards if you will turn on someone in your community who's not following the strictest of guidelines. They will pay you for that. You will become a hero. Amazing what they're doing right now. They're going to betray one another and hate one another. And many false prophets shall arise and shall deceive many. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. And when you watch those movies that Hollywood brought out back then, they had this incredible knack of grasping human nature. And they were able to take and show you how a warm, happy family or a city or a country went through this process to where no one trusted anyone. There was hatred, there was a coldness, and people would just turn on their own families and turn them in to the government out of fear and hatred. This country, whether you like it or not, get ready, because it's going to move to that. It cannot do anything but when you remove God, you replace the love of God, it's replaced with fear, control, and demonical powers that's going to eventually destroy this nation. It says, but he that endures to the end, the same shall be saved. That's where we are today. This is what's going on. So I asked today, could the COVID tractors be the brown shirt? I think so. They'll have a different name. They will eventually do the same thing. All right, that's it for this week. A lot to cover there, a lot to cover. You may have to go back and take a look at this again, but I hope you'll help us share this with somebody. Share with everybody, whether they're going to listen to you now or not. You never know. Next year they might, because they might be the guy who's got that knock at the door. We heard that you just got in touch with somebody who's got COVID. You need to come with us. All right, in the mail last week, News Nuggets and Insights, our May 1st program. And part 2 of Lessons to Lincoln was just sent out. Next week, we'll be sending out part 3. All right, now, this week in Syracuse, they're really excited up there. On Friday, the state of Indiana is opening up, and they're going to have their first service back in their building on May 16th. That's tomorrow. It's actually tomorrow from this program that you're watching today. So if you're in the area, please, by all means, join them. They'd love to have you. They'll be practicing their safe distancing. They got a big building up there, so they can have you spread out all over the place up there. Then on Pentecost weekend, they're planning a great big weekend, statewide, area-wide for Pentecost. They've even made arrangements with a hotel that's up there. So if you'd like to attend, they'd love to have you. Contact Steve Council. I've got the phone number up on the screen, or send him an email. All right, he'll be glad to get back to you. And they have special pricing if you want to spend the entire weekend. Special pricing at the hotel. And he did check with them. They will be open. So if you want to go up there and spend the weekend, have a great weekend, finally get out of your house, get back with the brethren, by all means, give them a call. They'd love to have you. For us, right here, tomorrow, we will be live streaming a sermon that I announced in the newsletter, and I've been talking about for the last 2 weeks. It's dealing with a revival, so to speak, that's coming this fall. Very important, and I would say this is probably one, if not the, but it's probably one of the most important messages that I've delivered up to date, because it talks about where we are in our time, how we need to respond, and the revival that's coming. Will it be something that God can participate in? And I'm calling the sermon, Can God Call Good What He Has Declared Evil? Well, we'll see. All right, that's it for the program. And every week, we like to close with a little warm video. And we got Crusoe back. Audrey's been able to find a new one. This is Crusoe Quarantine Virus Test. Take a look. I'll be right back to close our program.
Pizza! Get ready to say hello to my belly.
Oh, sweet! They actually put toilet paper on my half. Crusoe! So, don't eat it all.
True. I almost forgot. We need to save a couple slices for Mom and Dad. Hello? Are you guys hungry?
It's been 3 days, Crusoe. What do you think?
So...
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm sliding you a slice under the door. Just going to do a disinfect first. Okay, here it comes.
Mom, would you like a regular slice or one with toilet paper on it?
Neither. Hey, do you think you guys can let us out now?
I think as long as we can conduct a test for the hamster virus, I think that would be fine. Hang tight for a couple minutes while we set up.
Okay, you can come out now. Please get out of the vehicle and follow the signage. And please remain in your vehicle at all times.
Welcome to Daffy's Drive-Thru Hamster Virus Testing Clinic. We're just going to ask you a few questions. Have you been in contact with a hamster recently?
Obviously not.
Okay, great. And have you traveled recently to a country that has hamsters?
No.
Doesn't seem so sure. Okay, now I need to sniffer your ear, so please lean in closer. Not good. Smells like a hamster's been living in there. Okay, lastly, we need to take your temperature. Please kindly take off your dressers and bend over. This won't hurt at all, but you might still be scarred for life.
Alright, guys, that's enough. Come on, let's go.
Remain in your vehicle. Remain in your vehicle.
Thank goodness we're not being tested for hamster viruses. Well, that's it for our program again this week. I hope it's informative. Very important information that's into it. And all of us here, as we continue to pray for all of God's people each week, pray for the families of those who've been affected and all the lost ones who've died of this virus and everything else that's been going on that's kept this whole world in trauma. From all of us here, God's Unchanging Word, thanks again for watching. And remember, please share this with everybody you know, and they're going to love you for it. Till next week, God be with you.